The mystery of the disappearance of Phyllis Ann Flynn is one that lingers, casting a shadow over the years that have passed since that fateful night in May of 1988, which was before I was born. It's a puzzle that has defied resolution, leaving family and investigators grasping at straws in their quest for answers. After a birthday celebration at the Hotel Yorba in Detroit, Flynn vanished without a trace. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance are as mysterious as the hotel itself. She had requested that her father pick her up, a plea that would echo throughout the years as a haunting reminder of the unanswered questions. Now, the timeline of events is hauntingly sparse. A few days after her birthday, Flynn called home, signaling her desire to be retrieved from the Hotel Yorba. However, when her father arrived, she had evaporated into thin air, leaving behind an eerie void, and nobody has heard from her since. In the years that followed, the case went cold, a perplexing enigma with no breakthroughs. The detective assigned to Flynn's case retired, and the shadows seemed to close in on the scant leads. But even as the official investigation drew to a close, a glimmer of hope persisted among those determined to unravel the mystery. A family friend and a diligent Michigan State police detective breathed some new life into the cold case back in 2014, so about a decade ago, reigniting the flame of inquiry. The Community United Effort Center for Missing Persons brought national attention to Flynn's disappearance, thrusting it into the spotlight of awareness-building efforts. The passage of time has not dimmed the resolve of those seeking closure. The Missing in Michigan campaign, led by Detective Sarah Krebs, has tirelessly worked to unearth fresh clues. The story of Phyllis Flynn found its place on billboards, a visual plea for information that could hopefully pierce through the fog of uncertainty. But to this day, the question remains: what happened at the Hotel Yorba? The void left by Flynn's disappearance resonates, a silent call for answers. The reward offered by Crime Stoppers of Michigan stands as an incentive, a monetary beacon beckoning anybody with information to step forward. But with the passage of 36 years, the harsh reality is lingering. Flynn's family, against the odds, clings to hope that she might still be alive. But sadly, the Hotel Yorba, once a backdrop to a birthday celebration, now stands as a silent witness to a disappearance that continues to baffle those who seek resolution. So I don't exactly have a name for this next hotel, outside of knowing that it's somewhere in the UK. I know, vague, but it was worth telling today. Imagine a place shrouded in whispers and veiled in the unknown. A hotel that, over the years, has become an unsettling enigma, a backdrop to a haunting mystery that eludes comprehension. It's not your typical story. It's a tale woven with threads of uncertainty and shadowed by the inexplicable disappearances of 66 young people. Nestled in the heart of the countryside, this hotel, with its weathered facade, stands as a testament to a history stained by the unexplained. The corridors echo with the distant laugh of young people who once roamed freely, their footsteps now silenced by a force that transcends the boundaries of our understanding. The first whispers of the mystery dates way back, like decades, a quiet murmur amongst locals who traded stories of curious occurrences. As time unfolded, so did the tales of the vanished youths, leaving a chilling imprint on the history of this seemingly ordinary establishment. Each disappearance, if we're going to compare it to something, maybe a jigsaw piece missing from a larger puzzle, paints a spectral image of uncertainty. The missing people, diverse in their backgrounds, ages, and stories, all converge at this point, their common thread being a vanishing act that perplexes even the most seasoned investigators. The authorities, puzzled and haunted by the lack of clues, have combed through the hotel's history, interviewed witnesses, scrutinized every nook and cranny, but they've got nothing. The answers remain elusive, like ghosts slipping through the fingers of those who seek them. The hotel itself, with its creaking floorboards and flickering lights, becomes a stage where the mundane collides with the mysterious. An invisible hand seems to orchestrate a malevolent symphony, leaving behind a disconcerting silence in the wake of each disappearance. The local community, once welcoming, now gazes upon the hotel with a mix of fear and curiosity. Whispers in the wind suggest that the place holds secrets, that it harbors an otherworldly energy, indifferent to the laws of our reality. As the count of those who have vanished climbed, the hotel's reputation transformed. It became more than bricks and mortar. It was just this living, breathing entity with a story. The rooms, once filled with the innocent laughter of youth, now resonate with an eerie stillness, a reminder of those who stepped into the shadows and never returned. Yeah, that's not somewhere I want to visit. No thank you, I'll leave the mysteries there. I don't need to unravel them. Now next up we have a legend that I believe to be true. Many years ago, an English woman and her daughter, at the conclusion of a tour in the Near East, arrived at a Paris hotel at the time of the exhibition. They were given separate rooms, one above the other. Trust me, I wouldn't want to be in the same room as my mother. After resting for a few hours, the daughter went to go see her mother, but the room was empty and completely altered. Like new wallpaper, new furniture, new everything. She was panicking. She called the maid and then the manager, and the manager was like, "You're under a delusion. When you arrived at this hotel, you were quite alone." But the girl was like, "No, we signed our names in the visitor's book, mother and I." So they brought out the visitor's book, and above the daughter's name, what the mother had signed, was a signature of a stranger. Now, it wasn't until about a year later that the daughter learned that her mother had died suddenly of the plague, and that in order to save Paris from, crazy panic and the exhibition from absolute ruin, it was hurriedly agreed by the authorities that the death should be completely hushed up, and that the daughter should be made to believe, by the repeated denials of hotel servants, hotel managers, and cabmen, and the proofs of, the changed room and the altered visitors book that her unfortunate mother never reached the hotel. Imagine, like, you go to take a nap and you wake up and all of a sudden, okay, mom's gone, and you're Delulu. The girl allegedly found out the truth in a letter from a chambermaid. So when the story was originally told at a dinner at the house of Arthur Benson, Arthur Balfour, at the time, British Prime Minister, they were all hanging out, and Balfour was like, yeah, I'm gonna guess the ending. Now, a journalist for the Pall Mall Gazette, I think this was around 1913, talked to the author who originally published the tale, a Mr. Clement K. Shorter, noting by this time, of course, we've all heard the story. What's the truth to it? And Mr. Shorter's like, no, I believe it happened. It is a heck of a lot easier to believe that it happened than it was invented. And given an illness under precisely the same circumstances, the French police authorities are like the only police authorities in the world who are equal to coping with it so brilliantly. I can't imagine waking up and being told, hey, you're completely wrong. No, thank you. Now for a tale that cursed me to my core, Liz, Sarah, and the Cosmos Resort. 2 years ago, a seemingly ordinary vacation turned into a nightmarish odyssey for a pair of friends, Liz and Sarah. The backdrop? A hotel that, despite its outward appearance of renovation and cheerfulness, concealed a darkness that would shake the very core of their existence. So the girls went in the lobby, they're like, okay, we're gonna go sign in. But there was this feeling of unease that was just sort of everywhere in the air. The check-in process was marked by odd glances and a peculiar conversation with the hotel staff. But they got upgraded. Woohoo! Room 347. This room with a view that won Sarah over. Seemed like, okay, things are getting better. Maybe my gut's just off. Maybe I need a nap. The first night was uneventful for Sarah, but for Liz, the shadows whispered secrets that kept her awake. Strange scratching noises emanated from behind the walls, which, yikes, that's not a soundtrack I want when I'm trying to sleep. And it only got worse as the days went on. A hidden door, concealed behind a nightstand, revealed a narrow, ominous space that reeked of rust and bleach. Yeah, that's terrifying. As Sarah delved deeper into the mystery, she discovered a network of tunnels, a dark labyrinth that extended beneath the hotel. The eerie passageways, laden with a stench of decay, hinted at a sinister purpose, one that became much more apparent as time went on. Liz's disappearance on the final night of their stay plunged Sarah into a desperate search for answers. The hotel staff's nonchalant response and the dismissive attitude of the police created an air of conspiracy. Sure, because the hidden door that led to under the hotel with the stench of decay wasn't enough. Determined to unravel the enigma, Sarah returned to the haunted hotel, guided by an invitation that seemed to taunt her, if you will. The nights after became a harrowing exploration of the hotel's hidden layers. The H sections, neglected and avoided, hinted at a malevolence that defied, my brain. The discovery of a bricked-up elevator shaft and the disturbing encounters in the narrow tunnels hinted at a malevolent force that lurked within the hotel's very foundation. So, fast forward, it's the final night, and in a desperate attempt to retrace Liz's steps, Sarah was led to an encounter with entities that, weren't of this world. Liz, or a distorted version of her, beckoned from the shadows. The nightmarish entities, with eyes that pierced the darkness, pursued Sarah through the dilapidated corridors, transforming the once grand ballroom into a grotesque spectacle. Now this whole mess reached its climax on the mysterious 7th floor. The revelation that Liz's encounter in the tunnel had birthed something malevolent. Something that wore her face, but harbored unspeakable horrors. Yeah, it painted a bit of a grim picture. The hotel's twisted reality, where time and space lost coherence, left poor Sarah grappling with a profound sense of dread. Now, this sad story concludes with Sarah's escape, but the psychological scars, they run deep. The fear of encountering those otherworldly entities, of witnessing the distorted face of Liz, that's gonna linger like a memory you don't want to have. The hotel, now a malevolent entity in its own right, kind of stands as a thin veil that separates our world from the other world, and not one you want to go near. Time to travel over to the heart of Santa Fe, and no, that isn't a cue for Newsies and Rent fans, so hush. Nestled within the walls of the La Posada Hotel lies a tale that, it's gonna give you some nightmares, folks. At the narrative steeped in mystery, spectral apparitions, and unexplained phenomena. Cool, we got the whole trifecta. Room 256, once the abode of Julia Staub, echoes with the whispers of a bygone era, where the living and the dead seem to converge in a dance of the paranormal. Is it a ballet? So Chuck Barone, a vigilant security guard, recounted an eerie encounter that unfolded in this specific room of the hotel. In the company of a bellhop and a group of tourists, they approached said room, room 256, responding to a mysterious voice emanating from within. "I'm in here," it beckoned, yet upon investigation, the room was empty, with its windows locked from the inside, so there was no getting out of there. There was a phantom presence. Unseen, but you felt it. The paranormal enigma extended way beyond Chuck's story, by the way. His son John, a fellow guardian of the hotel secrets, if you will, witnessed a ghostly face in the men's room mirror. It was a woman's face, staring back at him, sending a shiver right down his spine, and this inexplicable encounter left him pale and shaken, which, Yeah, that tracks. Ross Weisenhoff, once a skeptic, found himself entangled in the spectral tapestry of the hotel as well. Awakening in the middle of the night, he noticed a luminescent figure at the foot of his bed. This entity morphed into the ethereal form of a woman, fixating on him with an otherworldly gaze. Now, this encounter shattered his skepticism, prompting a swift, "I'm getting out of here," as you do. The genesis of these ghostly manifestations lies in the tragic history of Julia, the lady of the mansion turned spectral hostess. She was once the vibrant center of Santa Fe's social tapestry, but fell into self-imposed exile after the loss of her 8th spawn. The Grand Mansion, a testament to love and opulence, transformed into the La Posada Hotel in 1936. Enter Christopher Chacon, a seeker of truth from the Organization of Scientific Investigation and Research. Alongside a team of experts, he delved into the paranormal intricacies of the hotel. Physical, psychological, and electrical examinations were conducted, leaving no stone unturned. 12 hours in isolation within the bedroom that's, doing all the bad things, monitoring the environment for any spectral stirrings. Infrared technology and night vision equipment were brought in, but despite the diligence, the source of the haunting remained elusive. Which, okay, we'll let you be. Ghosty ladies can do what you want, I would like to live. From the late 1800s to the 1960s, this place was a quaint but bustling town in Little Pennsylvania, thanks to its very prosperous coal mines. However, when a mine mysteriously caught fire in 1962, the flames began to spread underground via the interconnecting tunnels. Although the citizens were aware of the situation, they weren't truly troubled until 2 isolated incidents a couple years later. A gas station owner reporting abnormally high gasoline temperatures in his underground tanks in 1979, and a young boy nearly falling into a 150-foot deep sinkhole over in his backyard in 1981. After that, the town's population plummeted. This town has burned for about 50 years now. This mine certainly seems like a fiery lair of dastardly demons and spirits. What's more is the fire heats the groundwater to boiling temperatures, causing a lot of steam to rise. On a lot of days, this gives Centralia's landscape an unsettling, misty appearance. With only a couple of buildings left, it's a abandoned place. A lot of the residents are not there. I think there's only 4 left. So if you go to Centralia, it's a ghost town. This place has actually more people buried there than it has living residents, which is super unsettling if you ask me. So if you're driving around the town, you'll find 3 cemeteries: St. Ignatius, St. Peter and Paul Orthodox, and Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. If you're gonna walk around the ruins of this modern day ghost town, it'll give you the feeling of supernatural forces working underfoot. And because of all this, there's been some stories that have come to light. Some are stories from visitors who left in fear after thinking they saw a person or a thing, heard odd sounds, and some folks just felt like they were being watched. Other people go so far as to say that this place is the gateway to hell. One group of visitors heard what sounded like a voice saying something inaudible from down below when they were visiting a cemetery. At first they were like, okay, maybe it's somebody else, and they're like, forget about it. Then they heard it again, a little more clearly, just a few words, and it sort of sounded like, leave this place. At that moment, the hill the group was standing on started steaming, more so than before, and it really stunk, like rotten eggs. It spooked the friends, so they made the decision to leave, and as they were heading back to their car, they heard it again. Not the same words and not clear, but something like, why? Why did you do that? What was even weirder is that it wasn't like somebody was yelling it out of the bushes. It was quiet, kind of closer. Nobody knew where it was coming from. It seems like most colleges and universities have at least a couple of ghost stories to tell, and Wichita State University in Kansas is no exception. Tales of mysterious sounds, lights, and figures are commonplace in the older buildings on campus. 2 buildings in particular come up when the campus ghost stories start getting told. Henry Gymnasium and Wilner Auditorium are part of the WSU lore about things that go bump in the night. I love that song from Scooby-Doo. The story of the ghost in Henrian tells of a maintenance worker who was electrocuted on the very job in the 1950s. Details kind of vary. Some say he hit a live wire with his bare head. Another version says that he was hit by lightning while mopping. It said that his ghost appears in the building in the middle of the night and early in the morning. The auditorium, on the other hand, has gained a reputation for being very haunted. We've got all the usual suspects: flickering lights, doors closing on their own, disembodied voices, and the occasional apparition. A lot of folks have witnessed it. Mary Nelson, a program consultant for the library, says the ghost is likely that of George Wilner, the namesake of the building. She's like, he's probably friendly, just wants to make sure his building is taken care of. Which, I get it. Now, also apparently Fisk Hall might be haunted. Since it's the oldest building on campus, it certainly has the history to be a likely place for a haunting. It's been used as a men's dormitory, an infirmary during the influenza situation, and the office space for a lot of different departments. Even investigators from the Wichita Paranormal Research Society picked up the possible presence of a ghostie. We didn't get a name, sadly. I know cemeteries are kind of low-hanging fruit when it comes to being haunted, but let me have this. The Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia is home to a couple of notable ghosties, and I just fell so in love with them today that they had to make my list. Located on the 17-mile-long Wilmington River, some 3 miles down from downtown Savannah, is this fascinatingly beautiful cemetery that has been described as a natural cathedral. Like, come on! You've got these stoic, tall, live oak trees that are just cloaked in Spanish moss. They're all lining the winding paths. It's such a beautifully haunting allure to the many elaborate and time-stained monuments that are throughout this location. To offset the grays and the gloominess are these vibrant azaleas and plenty of other flowers that are just bursting with color when they bloom in the spring and summer. The 100 acres of this special place have stirred the emotions of generations of visitors over quite a few years. But apparently you're gonna feel something stirring you the minute you approach the main gate. And not because of a bran muffin or coffee. A novel that subsequently became a major motion picture that was published in 1994 owes a lot to the cemetery and vice versa. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil is a first-person account of life in the Old South, interwoven with a mystery that casts Savannah as its backdrop, and features the statue of a girl holding 2 small bowls, one in each hand on the front cover. Legend has it that the statue is haunted by the ghost of Lorraine Greenman, the little one who posed for the artist. Little Wendy, as the statue is also referred to, once stood sentinel over the Trostel family plot, but she became so idolized as a result of her newfound fame, and it wasn't even central to the book's plot, that the owners donated the statue to Savannah's Museum of Art to just avoid destruction and for safety. Another famous sculpture that has elicited some crazy stories or legends, depending on your point of view, is that of Gracie Watson, or as she is affectionately known, Little Gracie. This young one died of pneumonia and was memorialized in marble by artist John Waltz from nothing but a photograph. And for years, people have reported seeing a little one that fits her description playing around. The legend claims that she appears as a normal living one in a white dress who vanishes without a trace when you get too close. And to some, she still lives. Visitors leave toys for her to play with, especially around Christmas time, and if you move them or you take them away, she's gonna cry tears of human redness. So leave her toys alone. Let her play with them. What harm is it doing you? Alright, let's see if I pronounce this properly. Kilcassew Courthouse. I tried, folks, I really did. According to the local parish clerk of courts, the main part of the courthouse building was built in 1912. It is on the National Register of Historic Places, while an addition was tacked on in the mid-90s. A lot of folks believe that the courthouse is haunted, and that the individual whose ghost is doing that haunting is a convicted killer by the name of Toni Jo Henry. She was the only woman to be executed in the electric chair in Louisiana history, unless somebody forgot to put a name down, and it just so happens that the flip of the switch that led to her death happened here. Allow me to give you some context on her. For starters, she didn't really have an easy start in life. Her mother died when she was young, prompting her father to remarry, and Toni was not a fan of the new living arrangement, wanted to go live with an aunt. Why? Well, her dad wasn't great. He hurt her, prompting her to just run away instead. She fell into a world of crime, substances, and intercourse work. She was working at a brothel when she met a man named Claude Cowboy Henry. According to the local Gazette, Henry was a former boxer who, after leaving the ring, found himself living a life of crime. The two fell in love, and the cowboy seems to have treated Toni well. She was in the clutches of substance addiction when they met, but upon marrying, they were like, let's move to California. Let's try and kick that. However, they decided to go back to Texas for a minute, and Cowboy was arrested for a killing that he had committed before the couple had married. And he received a 50-year sentence for his crime. Toni Jo was still madly in love and was like, let's figure out how to get you out of jail. She found herself an accomplice for this plot, a man named Harold Burks, who went by Archie. Burks had served time in the same prison that the cowboy was incarcerated in. And Toni was like, let's use that knowledge. The first step? Let's rob a bank. Because why not? Toni and Burks encountered a man named Joseph P. Calloway, who was delivering a car and was like, okay, I'll give you a ride. According to the local Gazette, they were like, we're gonna hijack this car and use it as a getaway vehicle. But sadly, they killed Calloway. After Toni's arrest, the heinous nature of her crimes, coupled with her good looks and the fact that the death penalty was on the table, her trial became a media sensation. She was found guilty, sentenced to death, which was upheld after several appeals. She was executed in the electric chair on November 28th of 1942. And nowadays, well, her ghost is just hanging around the courthouse. According to various sources, there have been reports of unexplainable screams, electrical mishaps, and the smell of cheap perfume. But there's another odor sometimes reported at the courthouse that is far more disturbing and fitting to the story and death of Toni Jo Henry, the unexplainable smell of burning hair. Alrighty folks, we're gonna end today with the Dock Street Theater in Charleston, South Carolina. This theater, which is not located on Dock Street, but on Church Street, is pretty neat. One quirky fact is that at one time it was actually a hotel. It is now technically the last surviving hotel. Guests of the theater have claimed to see spirits roaming about. We've got sightings of ghostly apparitions in the rafters, apparitions on the stage, and a lot of folks are like, were they failed actors? Were they admirers of the theater? Was there something more tragic? Well, we know there's been a lot of sightings, but there's two particular spirits that have been seen more than any of the others. One of them is believed to be Junius Brutus Booth, the father of the infamous presidential assassin. No one's really sure why his ghost is haunting the theater, because aside from performing there with his theater troupe, and apparently he tried to kill the manager of the hotel, he doesn't have any other strong ties to the building. But the most frequently spotted ghost at this lovely theater is Nettie, who lived in Charleston during the 1800s and could usually be found at the Planters Hotel. She wasn't a guest or a member of the staff, she was a bit of a freelancer. What was her occupation? The world's oldest profession. Poor thing was killed by a bolt of lightning, leading to a sudden and unexpected death, leaving her with unfinished business that I guess nobody's been able to help her with yet. The ghost of Nettie can be seen gliding around aimlessly throughout the entire theater. Some of those who have caught a glimpse of her claim that she was wearing a tattered yet vibrantly colored red dress. For centuries, historians who investigated Jamestown had to rely on written accounts from the time in later historical documentation. For example, the legend of Pocahontas and John Smith was wildly romanticized through a white male Anglo-Saxon prism. Jamestown was a powerful symbolic legend, first of a new world claimed for the English Empire, then later the birth of a new nation. There was a strong motivation to enhance the legend with colonialist, patriotic, and religious fervor. But recent research, archaeological findings, and scientific documentaries have revealed shocking details and grim, actually horrific, realities of settlement life and death. Could it be possible that a foundation settlement of the American nation was rife with intrigue that included crypto-Catholicism in an anti-Catholic settlement, starvation, assassination attempts, and even killing and people-eating? Well, archaeological findings seem to indicate exactly that. Recent digs that started about 20 years ago at Jamestown have revealed shocking facts about life there. So archaeologists unearthed something stunning in structure number 191, which contained a brick and mortar oven of a kitchen. First, they found skeletal remains of dogs, cats, rats, and even a horse in the kitchen area. But then they found something even more shocking. The mutilated skull and severed leg of an English girl dating from about 1609. The skull and tibia bone both had numerous cutting and sawing marks on them, indicating that the body had been butchered. In addition, the back of the skull was smashed open, indicating that the skull had been bludgeoned, presumably to get at the brains, which are high in protein and eaten customarily from other butchered animals by the colonialists. The winter of 1609 was known as the starving time at Jamestown, and this was from a number of written accounts. During that time, of the about 600 total folks, only 60 people survived. Immediately next to the skull, a pottery bowl was also unearthed, indicating that all this was done at that kitchen. In fact, colonists could not have picked a worse time to try and settle in Virginia. Cores drilled from centuries-old trees near Jamestown by the archaeology team show that it was in the middle of a 7-year drought. The previous winter had been nearly as bad, and a lot of settlers had died of starvation. So it was during this time that John Smith ventured out in search of locals willing to provide the colonists with food. When he returned, he found that about 75% of the folks that had landed already starved to death. Desperate, a lot of folks decided to try to sail back to England on the small British ship, the Discovery, but Smith, trying to keep the colony afloat, aimed one of the fort's cannons at said ship and actually killed some of the defectors. In one of America's first trials by jury, Smith was condemned to the rope necklace, and by some accounts, he even had the rope there when Captain Newport sailed into the harbor with new settlers and stopped the whole end of life thing. Apparently, if you're visiting Colorado City, Arizona as just a random tourist, you're going to be followed by several white SUVs. Folks have reported getting a weird vibe driving through and seeing all these half-built compounds and people just staring at you creepily as you drive by. Well, I was checking the Wikipedia page. Turns out it's basically run by a cult. At least 3 Mormon fundamental sects are said to have been based in this area. A majority of the residents and many local officials belong to the most prominent of these groups, the Fundamental Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, whose corporation also owned much of the land within and around the town until state intervention in the 2000s. Direct quote, folks. A sect of Mormonism that broke off from the main church because they were excommunicated for refusing to renounce polygamy, because apparently the mainstream Mormons abandoned the practice. And they do a lot of horrible stuff. Men are not allowed to have intercourse with their wives, and the only people allowed to do so are seed bearers who essentially attack women. People have been kicked out and made homeless for simply disagreeing with the church leader. These folks have been accused of some really bad crimes we can't talk about, both in the US and in Canada. In January of 2004, local leader Warren Jeffs expelled a group of 20 men, including the mayor, and gave their wives and descendants to other men. Jeffs, now a convicted predator, stated he was acting on the orders of God, while the men expelled claimed they were being penalized for disagreeing with him. He was eventually placed on the FBI Most Wanted list, like the top 10, and arrested on August 28th of 2006. Most of the property in the town was owned by the United Effort Plan, a real estate trust of the FLDS, for short. In 2007, the state authorities began dismantling church ownership of the land, and the church retaliated and indoctrinated their followers against the state, believing they were being targeted because of their beliefs. So the followers became further and further secluded as a result. Remaining members refused to believe the charges against Jeffs, by the way. On April 6th of 2010, law enforcement officials in a nearby county of Arizona and Washington County of Utah served 5 search warrants seeking records from town officers. And these warrants were served on government officials and departments, including the town manager, as well as the only fire chief, which yikes. As a result of the initial warrants, the Department of Public Safety was shut down, and emergency responders were prohibited from responding to calls without the approval of county officials. That's a big deal. On March 20th of 2014, a jury heard a local case that ruled that the towns of Colorado City and local other cities had discriminated against locals Ronald and Ginger Cook because they weren't members of the FLDS church. They just moved there. So these folks were awarded $5.2 million for religious discrimination. They'd moved to the area in 2008, but were refused access to the utilities of the town because, well, they weren't part of the FLDS. After all that, how about a more simple ghost story to cleanse the palate? One from Arkansas. So back in 1931, a railroad worker named Lewis McBride allegedly killed his supervisor from the Missouri Pacific Railroad. The foreman had fired McBride for an infraction, and some claim that McBride had intentionally manipulated a piece of track to cause a train crash. Seeking revenge for being fired, McBride killed his former boss by bludgeoning him with a railroad spike. Authorities arrested him, and he went the way of electrocution. So not long after McBride's death, a mysterious moving light began appearing along the train tracks, far from the highway. People have witnessed it many times since, and even the TV show Unsolved Mysteries documented the phenomenon. Experts say that according to documentation in the local paper, which didn't give a date, but it was somewhere in 1932, there was a lot of reports of people seeing a light on the track. The story was that when they found one person, he had a lantern in his hand, and yeah, he got chased, and that was the end of his life. So the light, nowadays seen only at night, has been described as either a yellow, red, blue, or white glowing light. You would see this tiny light, said Bob Thompson, the local Historic Association president. What we saw was kind of a reddish golden light. Looked like someone had a baseball cap with a flashlight in it. Now Thompson said most of the time they would see the light and then would later vanish, but some folks have had more aggressive encounters. So what will scare you though is when it gets the size of a baseball cap, and sometimes you can see it swinging. Now it's not just coming at you, it's moving. And then it disappears. So you say, well, I did that, fine, let's go back to the car. So you turn around and it's behind you. And that's when you get scared. It's always in a place when there is no electricity around. It shows when it chooses to show up. And when it chooses for you to see it, you see it. Though there are some scientific theories to explain the occurrence, a lot of local legends attribute the light to the ghost of McBride, or of that of a different rail worker who lost their head in an accident and allegedly continues to search for his head. The tropical waters around Bermuda may feel like the opposite of Alaska's frigid wilderness, but both places have something in common: unexplained disappearances. Thousands of tourists, residents, hikers, and airplanes have vanished without a trace in a large area of land called the Alaskan Triangle, encompassed by Juneau, Barrow, and Anchorage. So in 2007, state troopers reported about 2,833 disappearances. For a state with a population of more than 700,000 people, this suggests about 1 in a couple hundred people disappeared, which that's a lot of people. So yes, there are many theories about this creepy phenomenon, some of which involve Alaska's unpredictable and often unforgiving environment, as well as, the sheer expanse of the landscape that can result in many lost travelers. According to local legends, the missing people likely fell victim to the Kushtaka, a race of shape-shifting otter people who lure humans away from civilization and transform their captives into one of them. And finally for today, let's talk about something interesting in history. Allegedly, parts of the incident that led to the US intervention in Vietnam never happened. After evading a torpedo attack, the USS Maddox reportedly engaged 3 North Vietnamese boats in the Gulf of Tonkin on both August 2nd and August 4th of 1964, according to the Pentagon Papers. Although without US casualties, the events prompted Congress to pass a resolution allowing the president to intervene in the country. So talk of this status as a false flag for the US involvement in the Vietnam War has permeated public discourse almost since the time of the attacks, especially after the government admitted that the second incident involved false radar images. But after resisting comment for decades, the NSA finally declassified documents in 2005, admitting the incident on August 4th never happened. Those involved didn't necessarily intend to cover up the incident to propagate a war, but the evidence does suggest an active effort to make it fit the claim of what happened, according to historians.